Mr. Mafulela. Thank you for joining us on the future under construction. How's SA? How's SA? How's things going down there?
SA is nice and sunny. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thanks. We're just talking about your career, and I was just looking at your profile on LinkedIn, and I found your career quite fascinating. What does a CFA do? Some of us who don't understand, what is a CFA?
So CFA stands for Chartered Financial Analyst. So it's a global investments and research professional qualification. So it's US based, but it's got sort of representation pretty much on every continent, and probably over 100,000 chartered financial analysts in the world.
Would you say that was your primary um, career aspiration growing up? Was that your end goal, or when you were growing up, there was something else that you were looking towards becoming?
Yeah. I think when I was growing up, I always dreamt of being an accountant. Simply because the most successful person we had in our family was my uncle. I think he was probably the first person I knew that had done well professionally, had a car, had a nice house, and that sort of thing. Growing up, and he had started accounting. So accounting was sort of the thing that I just sort of knew about and had a picture of success. But I think when I eventually went to university, I studied economics actually, and one of my professors in economics said to me, if you really want to do well in finance, look up CFA. That's the
Hmm.
qualification to do. I think I was
Hmm.
probably like in second year in economics, and as fate would have it, my first job, they actually offered me to pay for my CFA, and I took that opportunity and never looked back.
That's fantastic. To be honest, I think having that sort of support from an employer is absolutely fundamental, especially if you're looking to achieve specific goals in your career and in your life. The support of an employer, especially on the monetary side, especially at the beginning, is fundamental. And how is your perception of CFA now as a child financial analyst compared to what you thought it would be before going into it? Do the two
Yeah.
marry in any way?
I think largely yes. But I've obviously blended and pivoted and did all sorts with it. But I think throughout my sort of 2 decades corporate career and about a year in entrepreneurship now, it's been something that has been of good use. Um, so and the industry, financial services also evolved as well, right?
Mm,
So I mean, I started off as an investment analyst. So my first 8 years, it was mostly number crunching, analyzing investment opportunities, listed shares, etc. Uh, and I sort of got tired of the spreadsheets and then pivoted into wealth management and financial planning. So did that for
mm-hmm,
like a couple of years of that, and then went into consulting,
mm-hmm,
and now into entrepreneurship. But then with that whole journey, I think the CFA has always been valuable. I think globally, the certification has also grown as well, considerably, um, and become more recognized. It's more specifically for investment management and research. So there's certain professions where there's an over concentration of CFAs, but then
mm-hmm.
like you get in CFAs now doing almost everything from consulting to um, corporate finance, uh, private equity. many different opportunities. So, and I think the fact that it's quite well recognized and transferable
Mm.
across different countries, I think just makes it useful in that sense. I mean, there's a lot of other things that are also similar as well, but I think CFA, sort of makes it easy, to to work in different regions, areas,
Mm.
countries, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
I think that's one of the good things about certain professional qualifications. I think the transferability, being able to be fluid with borders, um, even if you're working remotely, to be able to have a sought after skill that you can use is one of the things that a lot of people don't seem to understand, especially amongst our teenagers. They always look at the short termedness of of their careers, and they're looking at, okay, what can I do now? And they never plan, in advance. Like for example, in your case, you looked at your initial interest was in accounting, where the rules, accounting rules, are sometimes specific to each country, and when you move to a different country, you have to learn new things all over again. Whereas if you look at CFA, for instance, it's global. You can the principles are the same regardless of whichever country you go to. And I think that's some of the things that teenagers, whenever they're looking to careers is something that they need to consider as, how fluid is this role? Can I transfer these skills from this profession to another profession? Should I get bored in this particular instance? Let's talk about your day to day, your normal day to day in as a an investment analyst. How was that? What would you do?
Sure. So that's been varied as well, eh? Because I think the reality is that you're always learning new skills, even up to now, right? Uh, I think the hallmark of a professional is a willingness and an ability to learn things, learn new skills. I think that's quite important. So, I mean, when I started off as an investment analyst in Zim,
Mm-hmm.
so born and bred in Zim, so I started off there, analyzing shares on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. I think very small stock market. If you sort of look at global market capitalizations, I think globally we got like what, maybe 9,000 listed companies. Zim has got like like 100. I think back then, or probably even less. I'm not quite sure anymore. Uh, so a lot of that was like reading research reports, building valuation models, doing research recommendations, maintaining buy sell lists, engaging with clients, retail clients, institutional clients, all sorts of investors. So that was sort of like like my start, and that's when I did my CFA then, and completed my CFA doing mostly that sort of work. Um, and then I moved into the public sector with a unit in Zim called the Privatization Agency of Zimbabwe, which was responsible for public-private partnerships. So that was mostly sort of corporate finance work. But in fact, before that, I'd actually moved into asset management.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more from the sell side research to a buy side asset management environment, then into corporate finance. Um, and then moved to South Africa and started off in corporate finance and private equity. So very similar things. So more looking at investment opportunities, analyzing them, looking at trends, understanding where the best opportunities are, and then from there I pivoted into financial planning and wealth management. So I started off as a financial advisor, so some of those skills were transferable as well, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
then, you're moving from sort of analyzing the opportunities to, presenting some of those opportunities to potential clients and investors, right? So there was that sort of transferability, and then I did my CFP. So
Mm-hmm.
that point again about continuous professional development and learning, I think is quite key. So
Mm-hmm.
so I did my CFP because that's the sort of qualification of choice in the wealth management industry. So CFP stands for Certified Financial Planner. So that's also a global certification, but it's got that same nuance you're talking about, like accounting. So you do CFP in your area, if that makes any sense. So it's a global
Okay.
thing, but then, my CFP is for South Africa. The CFPs in the UK, they do slightly different things there, because then you have to understand, certain legislation, tax, and investment concepts. Some of them that are unique to your area.
Hmm.
Um, and then I moved into asset management, more on the distribution side of things. So those skills are always transferable, and now into consulting work, sort of trying to combine a little bit of almost all of that, right? So I think day to day one has to be willing and flexible to adopt and learn. And I mean, like now things like behavioral finance. I mean, 10 years ago, they were not even a real issue.
Hmm.
Maybe a little bit longer, but I mean, like now, behavioral finance is an integral part of finance and investments. It's not so much, sort of like the more logical sort of things. It's also understanding how people, the psychology of money, how people relate with money, that sort of thing. So those are new topics that are being developed almost, on a, on a, on
Within
a,
our
on a
last decade, yeah.
yeah,
I think I think it's absolutely fascinating the plethora of options that become available to you once you have the certifications. If because
yeah,
I hear you talking about the asset management, I hear you talking about wealth planning, I hear you talking about investment analysis, and all of these can be a specific career in their own right.
yeah,
If somebody was to look at going into that and pursuing those particular areas as their main 9 to 5. And I think
yeah,
those are the things that, as as kids, watch this and learn from this, is that I think the hardest part is getting the certification. Once you are
yeah,
in there, once you have the certification, I think that's when the easy part begins. Oh, yes, there's a lot of continuous learning, there's a lot of continuous development, there's a lot of understanding, but that's the joy of it. You are continuing to develop rather than trying to figure things out as you go. Um, what would you say is the requirement, minimum requirement? Say, for example, someone looking to get into CFA, what do they need to be able to qualify to study it?
yeah. Hopefully it hasn't changed lately, because I haven't obviously checked it, more
Mm,
recently. But typically it's just a BCom
mm,
degree in finance, investments, economics, all of that. That's fine. So then that allows you to be able to register for CFA level one,
mhm,
and the certification has got three levels. So level one, level two, and level three. So there's been quite a few changes over the years. Level three used to be primarily on portfolio management, but I think
mm,
now they've also added, um, you know, things like wealth management, and level two. There's been a lot of changes around, financial analysis, and understanding, different trends in the industry now. And then level one is really the basics of finance, understanding, valuation models, and the basics of, sort of almost finance 101. So
yes,
so quite a few changes, over the years, because that's the thing with CFA as well. They keep, you know um uh, 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 renewing their curriculum in line with trends and changes, in the investment space. So typically, it would take you like 3 years. I mean, like you're very right about, sort of having the certification earlier on, right?
mm,
I think I would definitely recommend doing it in your 20s. you know, Probably not something to do in your 30s or 40s. I think it's a little bit brutal, and trying to combine it with family and
mm,
like a full-time job. I think it's going to be tough, right? I mean, I know a lot of people that have done it, and I've got, hat off to those people, but I think definitely, if, from your point around, sort of doing the certifications early, because they open doors. So, I mean, CFA has opened a lot of doors for me,
Mm,
over the years, different types of doors, that allow me to learn, new things, get exposed to new opportunities, etc. So definitely doing it early would help. Uh, Lots of study time required. So I'll say typically like a year per level would probably
mm.
be more realistic. I mean, there's some people that can maybe try and squeeze in two levels in 1 year, but I don't think you'll be able
Oof.
to do much else.
Yeah, I think the time requirement for studying for professional qualifications, I think sometimes a lot of people underestimate the time requirement and the effort required as well. Um, I've known, especially my career studying ACCA, is the time requirement. I learned the hard way. Let's just say after failing a couple of exams without because of not putting sufficient time
Yeah.
into it. What advice would you give, say, to somebody looking at this as a career prospect? I think you've done. I, I think you've gone through most of it. You've done everything from investment analysis to wealth management, asset management, and you've now moved into your own space, trying to pivot all this experience you've had into um, into a business, which can then give you your own financial independence. How what advice would you give somebody looking to this as a career?
Yeah. So I mean, if your interest is in sort of in investment research, I can't think of something better than doing your CFA, right? Because it'll firstly definitely show that you are committed to the space, right? Because
Hmm.
the effort that it's going to take for you to go through the certification and the level of intellect and competency it demonstrates and professionalism, I think will definitely open a lot of doors, right? So 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 yeah. So I'll say it's a good place to start, but obviously one has to stay open minded because a lot of things, a lot of like interest can change, in the journey. But I don't think it'll be a good foundation to have either way.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic
Mm.
um because obviously long term, if you look at professional qualification, barring any misconduct or anything like that, it's something that stays with you for life. Once it's like being a doctor. Once you're a doctor, you're always a doctor, regardless of whether you've retired or not. You still retain those expertise, you know, and it is an expertise that you don't have to um have like physical attributes. You don't have to be like physically able, as long as you can articulate yourself well and understand information and assess analyze information. I think um regardless of whatever stage you are in life, you can still use those expertise.
Oh,
So let's
absolutely.
talk a bit more about moving into the consulting space.
Mm,
How has
mm.
that been? Obviously,
Yeah.
normal progression for most people is that they would finish their CFA, get a job, get some experience under their belt, and then try and pivot, like in your case, into consulting, and having their own you know thing going on. Not, I won't say on the side, because now it's your main 9 to 5.
Yeah.
How has that transition been?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely been an interesting and also fulfilling, journey as well, and quite nuanced in the sense that there's definitely clear advantages, and there's also some constraints as well, right?
Mm,
So I mean, obviously, being employed offers that financial security, that predictable paycheck. So I think
mm,
that's always nice. But at the same time as well, going into entrepreneurship gives you that ability to be versatile, take advantage of opportunities, trends, with much more agency and flexibility that maybe one might be able to do in a corporate job. Sometimes you
mm,
can. There's always lots of opportunity as well to be an entrepreneur within organizations. But often organizations are quite inflexible
mm.
and slow, right? To move, and I think entrepreneurship gives you the ability to really work on what you're passionate about, what you're good at, and hopefully what somebody's willing, to pay you for, right? So I think now in my mid 40s, I've thought long and hard about this. So I took a year of work altogether when my daughter was born, and really thought to use the opportunity to reflect whether it's a good idea to go back and sort of grind some more in corporate, or maybe to really take the plunge and do something that's uniquely me, right?
Mm.
And I went for the later in the end, with obviously all the risks that it comes with. Um, but ultimately the proof is in the pudding. So
Yes.
so the jury is still out. But I think life is, there's no hard and fast rules. The right answer is what works for you ultimately.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very key point to make when you looking at a career is what works for you is what's best. You look at your individual circumstance, like in your case you just had a newborn, and you're looking at, okay, does my 9 to 5 fit in with this new structure that I have, with the child, and you're trying to trying to look at the me being a parent as well. Some of those that actually drives most of my decision making now when I look at potential roles, is how much time does it give me with my family. If I find that
Absolutely.
it takes a significant chunk of time away from the family, I'm normally hesitant to take on those roles, because the, with family, especially when with children, as they grow, you only get one shot at it. you know there are things, fundamental bits that you miss, and if you miss them, you've missed them for good. And like
Absolutely.
in your case, taking a year off, I kudos to you, man. I don't know whether I could have done that. But
Yeah. No, it's. I mean, you also have to prepare for it as well. I mean,
Mm,
having studied economics, investments and financial planning, I'm quite disciplined with money actually, right?
mm,
And I think it's important because, so in I mean in finance, there's what they call life cycle finance,
mm,
and I'm a CFA has done quite a lot of research around this area, because what tends to happen is most people plan their life in silos, but what
mm,
you're actually supposed to do is plan your whole life in its entirety, if that makes
mm-hmm.
sense, right?
Yes.
So you might find that there are periods where you earn a lot more, right? One needs to be quite disciplined and smooth out your standard of living.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite important, because then when you get periods like where you earn a lot less, it's you're balancing it out, right? So I mean, if I give you an example, most people follow football, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get a lot of young talented people, they break it into some sort of football league, etc. They're not going to end for like 20 years, right?
Mm,
Odds you sort of end for like 10 years at your peak of your career. But if you were to live at that level, you're going to have quite a big fall, right?
yes.
So you find that most of those people have to have good financial planning habits, and live off considerably less. I mean, so most of my career, I've probably lived off maybe 25% of what I earned throughout that whole period. So that smooths out and allows me to do even what I'm doing now, trying to set up an entrepreneurship journey. So it's not, there is a price and a reality that one has to be able to manage over periods of time.
Delayed gratification is, I think that's what we talked about earlier,
Absolutely.
before we started recording, was the issue of delayed gratification, of wanting things now, and understanding that, you know, there's always going to be a tomorrow,
Yeah.
and preparing for that tomorrow is essential. So not everything you see that's shiny today is of use to you now. Yes, it might feel some urge or some itch, scratch some itch, but in the long term, does it serve you? The way I've always looked at it now, especially um, having spoken to a lot of people in finance and in my career as well in accounting, I've always said to myself, if whatever I'm buying is not going to generate me an income, I'm not going to buy it, because what it means is that it's going to drain money from you rather than generate money for you. So yeah, I think that's a very good concept to have. It's a very good concept to have. As we come to the end, any words of wisdom for some of us who are looking to build our wealth over the next couple of years, to the
Yeah.
point where we can actually retire comfortably. Any words of wisdom there?
So there's only one free lunch in finance and
Mm,
investments. It's diversification.
mm,
So I think diversification is very important. Spending less than you earn is very important, and finding ways to be tax efficient over, the your working career is also quite important as well. So I mean, different countries have got different things. So for example, in South Africa, there are different tax advantaged investment solutions, for example, that you could use to defer tax
mm-hmm,
and save a little bit more, towards your retirement, for example. So I mean, those are things that if you start them early, so if you delaying like gratification, and you're using some of these tax advantage structures that both defer the tax that you pay now, and often the tax that you pay within those investment vehicles, it allows you to grow your wealth over time. I think you can get to that point where you can actually afford to take risks and pursue, certain things that you feel, that feel right, but also, in reality are quite risky,
mm,
and to be able to get into that position to do those sort of things, there is a price that one has to be willing, to pay
to pay.
beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think getting good financial planning and tax advice early is quite important. Making sure that you try and live off much less than you earn, right? Is very important. No need to sort of upgrade too quickly, and and buy the expensive things. And often people think it's the small stuff that actually, like people save on the coffee, etc. I mean, like I'm of the view that enjoy your coffee. I think
Mm,
the real stuff is like the house you live in, and the car
mm,
that you drive, and debts and things like that, like the big stuff. So if
mm.
you get the big things right, and you get the thinking right over long periods of time, I think generally you do well.
Mr. Mafulela, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure sitting at your feet to understand some of these things. It's something that we take for granted, and I hope, my sincere hope is that, and for those who are going to be watching this, is that you can use this wisdom, to your advantage, and prepare yourself, especially for our futures.
Thanks, Becky. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for having me.